Hey guys, this is Sarah, and today we're going to talk about reading in Spanish. So quite a few times in my videos and on Goodreads and social media and things like that, I have had people ask me why I don't read in Spanish. It's something that I mentioned in a few of my videos and in general because I'm a Venezuelan booktuber and I do all my videos in English. So I thought it'd be a great topic to address and to let you guys know the reasons behind the choice that I made to not read books in Spanish. So I talked a little bit about this in my booktube introduction. I moved to the States when I was 9. I was born in a city inland of my country. It's called Barquisimeto, and I spent the first 9 years of my life there. Obviously, Spanish is my first language, but when I moved to the States, I stopped learning Spanish. And when I say learning Spanish, I say learning vocabulary, learning grammar, learning sentence structure, learning literature. All those types of things that you get in an English class, I stopped taking Spanish English classes, if that makes sense. So I had the basic knowledge of my first 9 years of Spanish. So I can speak in Spanish and defend myself pretty well. But intellectually, my vocabulary is not as big as I would like it to be. It's not a huge range of words. Sometimes, even to this day, I will not know how to say a word in Spanish that I know in English. Once I moved to the United States and started my English classes, my English vocabulary and my knowledge of the English language grew far greater than my knowledge of the Spanish language. It was such a huge problem for my family who was still here because I learned all these new things. I started horseback riding in the United States. My stepfather at the time was a mountain climber, so I learned all this new vocabulary in English that I never translated because I didn't know how. And I would talk on the phone to my dad and tell him, bueno, estaba en el rancho hoy y tuve que ir cantering. But I would explain what I did at the ranch, that I said, and I started doing cantering, and I could not translate cantering because it was something that I never learned because I never had to use it when I lived in Venezuela. And that's pretty much what happens still. My Spanish, since I've moved back, has gotten a lot better. I graduated from high school here, so it's definitely much better than it used to be, but still, English is the better language, although my native language is Spanish. It's a little complicated and it's hard to explain to people because I feel like they're both my native languages. I started learning English so young that I don't remember a time when I didn't know it. And sometimes my wires get crossed on my language wires get crossed, and it's hard to explain to people why that happens, why I know words in English that I don't know in Spanish and vice versa. And it has a lot to do with the reason why I don't read in Spanish. In an effort to improve my Spanish, I enrolled in my high school to do Spanish classes. But because I already spoke Spanish, my class was Spanish for Spanish speakers. Basically, I had 2 English classes, one in Spanish and one in English, where we would talk about grammar, we would talk about spelling, vocabulary, we would talk about literature, analyze literature, and all those different stuff in Spanish. And it was an experience. I definitely learned a lot more than I thought I would have, and I got a little better. I got a little bit better at it. One of the assignments that we had to do for class was spent 20 minutes every time you came into class, 20, 30 minutes, something like that, every time you came into class reading a book in Spanish. And I was like, oh shoot, okay? Because Spanish literature writing styles are much more complex than people realize, and I will talk about that in a few minutes. But as a way to cheat this lesson part of my life, I got the Twilight books in Spanish. I have all 4 Twilight books in Spanish, and they are in those special boxes that I always mention. But I read those throughout my semester. And when I say read those, I don't really mean read them, because I already knew what happened. I've already read the story, I already knew what happened, I already know their thoughts. So yes, I read it, but I didn't have the same difficulties that I would have if I was reading a different book, because I already knew what happened. And the words that I didn't know, the sentences that I didn't understand, those types of things I could glance over and skim because I already knew the story. In contrast, after the 4 books were finished, because obviously I'm reading them really quickly because I've already read them, someone got The Host in Spanish. The Host in English is a thick book. It's a very new, complicated world type of stuff. Reading it in Spanish was an experience. I got to chapter 5. Barely. Thank God the semester was over, because I was not going to do it. It was like reading a Japanese dictionary. That's how much I did not understand what was happening and what was going on. It was like trying to decipher a code, like the Da Vinci Code. And it makes me sound really dumb, but it's not that I don't know my language, it's that Spanish literature is hard, okay? Spanish literature is very poetic, very descriptive. It is very emotive, okay? And you see it, when you read it, you notice that it's very verbose. And that's a big word, which means it has a lot of vocabulary. It has big words in it. Okay? That's what it means. It has a lot of big words in it. Big words that people don't use in common when you're talking. So, even though I speak Spanish and I'm comfortable speaking Spanish, I live every day speaking Spanish, literature is different. You have to have a certain intellectual level to be able to understand Spanish literature. So the assigned reading in class was hard to read because it was in Spanish. The Host in Spanish was hard to read. And the problem that I find the most about picking books to read in Spanish is that my favorite genre, which is young adult, which you've probably noticed by now, is lacking in original Spanish YA literature. Okay? It's not that we don't have YA literature, it's basically translated YA literature. We got The Mortal Instruments translated, we got Twilight translated, we got Divergent translated, we get the Justin Bieber memoirs translated, but there is no original Spanish young adult literature, which is beside the point. But if I'm going to read The Mortal Instruments, I'd rather read it in its original form. I'm not going to pick up The Mortal Instruments in Spanish when I know that just buying the ebook, I can read it in English by the true form. Because when you translate a book from English to Spanish, it loses something. A little bit. So it's hard to find material to read. I'm sure at some point in my life I will get to the point where I feel like my vocabulary in Spanish is good enough to be able to understand adult Spanish literature. And my dad has tried, and my mom has tried, everyone has tried to open me up into that channel. But I'm just not ready yet. I feel like I need to read the books that I want to read that are young adult, that are popular right now, because I'm moving on from that YA phase. I'm going to reach a point in my life that I will not be able to connect to teenagers. And I'm going to be 21 this year, which is not that bad. But as the years keep going, I will want to find adult literature. I will want to find things that have to do with where I'm at in my personal life. And that will probably open up that channel of Spanish literature, because the original Spanish literature, whether it's from a Mexican author, a Venezuelan author, a Spanish author, they're mostly adult books. And I don't feel ready yet. That is the biggest reason why I don't read in Spanish. I hope that clarifies why I always say I don't read in Spanish. It has nothing against my language. It has nothing against my culture. I just don't feel ready. I'm rambling a little bit because I have no idea how to structure this video, to be quite honest. I just sat down and talked. If there's any confusion on my English and my versus my Spanish, or any confusion on my Twilight reading in Spanish experience, if you have any questions about anything I've said in this video, please put it down in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you have the same problem with your native language. Probably not, because if it's your native language, you probably prefer it that way. Let me know if you're bilingual like me and you have similar problems, similar obstacles that go through when you're reading. Thanks so much for watching this video, and I'll see you next time. Bye!